Welcome back to Chapter Chats. In this episode, we're going to be diving into Chapter 6 of Chuck's 5th edition of ISD from the Ground Up, a no-nonsense approach to instructional design. This chapter, Behavioral Objectives and Objective Domains, unpacks the foundational role of objectives in instructional design. Whether you're refining your skills or are new to instructional design, this discussion will hopefully provide some clarity and inspiration. So, let's dive right into question number 1, Chuck. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do it.
Here we go. Objectives are central to the instructional design process. How would you describe their role and why they are so critical to guiding our overall design?
Well, objectives are instructional design. What they do is they set out the blueprint for what you want to accomplish. They tell us what the content is. They tell us who the audience is. They tell us the behaviors that we are expecting to see. And they tell us to what degree should people be able to master a particular objective. And I have found that this is one of the most difficult things that students struggle with. I struggled with it. Dr. Cook and I used to have discussions about evaluation, this whole notion of why do you need a degree statement if you don't really do evaluations? So we'd have all these theoretical discussions about it. And as I've taught it now over the years, what I found that students, you have to go over the corner with this. You have to be able to say, okay, I really need to have these things, and here's how I do these things. And to me, this is a logical maturation point for a designer. Whether you're doing this as a new gen and you're taking one course just to do better things, or if you're getting your PhD, if you can't write objectives and you can't figure out what's going on with them, you are going to struggle in this. And honestly, I still struggle with some objectives I have to write because I really have to concentrate and think about what's going on.
Indeed. Yeah. Why is it essential for objectives to be both observable and measurable? And could you also explain the difference between terminal and enabling objectives and how they work together?
Sure. The whole notion of objectives of observable and measurable is how else do you determine mastery? So in the old world, I went to a 4-year college for my undergrad that didn't have grades. It was pass-fail. So essentially it was up to the instructor to decide whether you made the mark or not. And most people did. It wasn't like that, but it was just a different way of looking at it. So now you think about in terms of objectives in higher education, which all the regional accrediting bodies now are really tough on this. They want to see objectives for every course. They want to see real objectives. They want to see observable and measurable objectives. They want to know what people are paying for and what they can expect to receive at the end of that. And that's part of that relationship between the learner and the facilitator is, okay, I'm saying you're going to be able to do these things. I will help you get to this point. But I can't just look at you and tell if you've got something. So when you see objectives with understand or learn or all the other things we've talked about 600 times on here, the reason you don't want to do that is because you can't measure it. There's no way you can legitimately measure that. And I can assure you the higher up the difficulty level, so things that are for certification or for degrees or any of these other things, then you're going to have to be able to do this. And terminal and enabling, people just struggle with this. They could either write terminal objectives and not enabling objectives, or they can't do one or the other. It takes a while to be able to do both. But the reality is terminal objectives are the sum of what a learner will be able to do at the end of a lesson. So whether it's a micro lesson or whether it's 16 weeks in a program, it's, okay, what are they going to walk out with? What will I be able to measure and observe and evaluate in each of these students when they leave? Enabling objectives are the building blocks. What do you have to do to be able to get to this terminal objective? And this gets into a lot of hierarchical things too. The deeper you get into this as instructional designer, the more you find out that you could have 100 terminal objectives and 1,000 enabling objectives. Because a program may have a goal that you kind of write like an objective, but a terminal objective is very specific to one segment of your learning that you're designing. And then you have the enabling objectives to support that.
I do have a follow-up question just out of curiosity, because I do struggle with this as well. The terminal objective, is that the B, the A, B, C, D? Is that the B, the behavior? Is that what that actually is? And then the enabling objectives for
No,
that?
it's really all. And that's why they're so hard to write, because you think about it, you struggle writing conditions for enabling objectives. What are the things that are really going to be in here? So the ABCDs, audience, behavior, condition, degree.
Okay.
Conditions are difficult for people. They can't conceptually get around this notion of, oh, I have to design what I'm going to physically give them or what I'm going to make available for them. So a condition is a discussion, it's a textbook, it's a lecture, it's a field visit, it can be anything. But what are you going to provide the learner for them to be able to travel through this learning? And enabling is just each of the little components that go with your terminal. So after a while, it starts to flow and it'll make more sense the more you do it. But don't think that any of us don't at certain times kind of sit back and say, wait a minute, I'm not even doing what I say I should do. Let me think about this for a minute. And the other thing I'll say that I think is really important in terms of the book and looking through this chapter, because there's a lot of detail in here. And you might want to read it 2, 3, 5 times, depending on what you're doing with the book. But even when I was rewriting it for this 5th edition, I went back and said, okay, I need to rethink that. And I'd rethink it and write it about the same way anyway. But I would still think about it. And you have to really be okay with this level of detail. You have to really be okay with the notion that, okay, I'm going to provide the framework and the foundation for what I want these learners to do.
Yeah. Question number 3. Short form objectives are mentioned in this chapter. What are their key features and how do they differ from more traditional detailed objectives?
So when we talk about short form objectives, what we're talking about is a working step between your analysis phase and your formal objectives, which will be the ABCD 4 parts. So if you look at NOP analysis, which is also covered in this book, and we've talked about numerous times here on this channel, this is a short form way to do it. And if you're working with subject matter experts, you're working with a board, however you're thinking about this, if you're trying to gather information, they're not going to care about all 4 parts of an objective, and they're not going to sit there and help you with that. But what they're going to say is, to be able to do this, you need to be able to do that. So if you're thinking about it in terms of apprenticeship, you're thinking about it in soft skills, you're thinking about it in any world of content, what you want to do is just start doing the bullet points. Think about, okay, well, there's 10 things that this person says I should be able to teach for them to be able to get from A to B. So then you take those bullet points, which are your short forms, and you turn them into your more formal long form objectives, which will have all 4 components.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. Question number 4. Objectives, goals, and procedures often get conflated. Could you share at least 2 ways that objectives stand apart from these other elements and why this distinction matters so much?
Well, one thing I've found is goals and objectives often get confused with people that don't have a lot of experience. So when I'm working with SMEs or boards or clients or what have you, they think in terms of goals. Okay, I want better employees. I want people that can pass the certification. I want a better organization. I need this or that. They're not thinking about the 4-part objectives that we work with professionally. What they're thinking about, this is a general outcome I want from this process. Objectives are the very specific things that get you to that. And that's, pretty normal, right? And you work your way through it. And as you look in the chapter, you're going to see that procedures get mentioned too, because many times young designers or novice designers write objectives as procedures. So instead of saying a learner should be able to do something at this degree of mastery, they'll say, and next you do this. And next you do that, and next you do that. That's a procedure. That's not objectives. Now, you can easily take a procedure and write it as an objective, but they are 2 very separate things. So goals are different. Procedures are different. Objectives are different. They all play a role. They're all important, but find the right spot for it and make sure you know what you're doing when you're talking about these things.
My last question for you, Chuck. Can you explain what performance agreement entails and why it's such an important concept in the instructional design process?
Yeah, performance agreement is really pretty cool. And Dr. Cook used to talk about this, but he never went into any real detail about it. And when I started teaching this and started thinking about it and writing these books, I thought this is really important because this is a quality control step, among other things. But what performance agreement is, it's saying that what you say in the objective is what you actually evaluate. And there are 10 million examples of this. And one thing that I do when I do forensic ISD is I always look at performance agreement very early in the process. Because if they say someone is going to be able to do something and then they don't really evaluate it, then what do you have? You really have nothing going forward. And I've given the example on here before, nursing programs where they did very little clinical work. And when they actually got into bedside, they couldn't do things to the level that they needed to do them because they had never really practiced them and been evaluated on them. So performance agreement is quality control. It's all about the relationship between what are we thinking about here? It's the relationship between what we say they're going to do and what we're actually going to measure in terms of mastery.
Thanks so much, Chuck, for sharing your insights in this chapter chat. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in the next chapter chat.